First Officer Krill'toc of the Galactic Confederation tapped his claws nervously against the pristine white conference table. The diplomatic meeting with a newly discovered species called humans was scheduled to begin in precisely 7 minutes. The Confederation had stumbled upon Earth just 3 orbital cycles ago, and initial observations had classified humans as mostly harmless, a designation that Krill'toc was beginning to seriously question. "Would you stop that infernal tapping?" His science director Belvazar, her multiple-eye stalks swiveling in his direction. "You are making everyone anxious." "Everyone is anxious," Krill'toc shot back, but he stopped the tapping. "Have you reviewed the preliminary data on these humans? Their planet is a disaster zone. They have survived multiple extinction-level events, fought wars that decimated entire continents, and somehow still managed to develop rudimentary space travel." Belvazar waved a dismissive tentacle. Yes, they are resilient, but they're also technologically primitive. The most advanced weapons systems barely register on our threat assessment scale. Plus, they are physically quite fragile. No exoskeletons, minimal natural defenses, poor sensory capabilities. Then explain why Admiral Voxnall insisted on bringing a full security detail. Krill'toc gestured toward the 6 heavily armed Confederation guards positioned around the room. "The Admiral is always paranoid," Belvazar replied with a snort. "Remember when he deployed a battlecruiser to make first contact with those floating gas bags on Proximine? The poor creatures nearly died of fright." Before Krill'toc could respond, the conference room doors slid open with a soft whoosh. Admiral Voxnall strode in, his ceremonial cape billowing dramatically behind him. Honestly, the Admiral never missed an opportunity for theatrics. "They are here," the Admiral announced gravely, as if he were pronouncing a death sentence rather than introducing diplomatic guests. "The human delegation has docked. They are being decontaminated now." "How many?" asked Belvazar. 3, replied the Admiral. "Their leader, some kind of diplomatic specialist, and—" Voxnall's voice dropped ominously. "A military advisor." Krill'toc felt a chill run down his central nerve column. "Military? I thought this was supposed to be a peaceful first contact." "It is," the Admiral said, taking his seat at the head of the table. "But apparently, humans don't go anywhere without military representation. They claim it's standard protocol." The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. Krill'toc didn't like it one bit. What kind of species brought weapons to a peace talk? Barbaric ones, that's what. The silence was broken by another whoosh of the doors. 3 figures entered. Unmistakably human. Krill'toc had studied the physiological reports, but seeing humans in person was something else entirely. They walked on just 2 limbs. Their skin was exposed, not covered by a protective carapace, and their faces so flat, with features all bunched together in the center. How do they even see properly? "Greetings, representatives of Earth." Admiral Voxnall rose and performed the traditional Confederation welcome gesture, a complex maneuver involving all 4 of his upper appendages. "I'm Admiral Voxnall. On behalf of the Galactic Confederation, I welcome you to Diplomatic Vessel Harmony." The tallest human stepped forward. "Thank you, Admiral. I am Ambassador Jackson Reeves of the United Earth Government. This is Dr. Amara Patel, our xenolinguistic specialist." He gestured to a smaller human with long, dark head fibers. "And this is Captain Thomas Blackwell, representing Earth's Joint Defense Force." Krill'toc studied the military human with interest. Captain Blackwell stood perfectly still, his posture rigid. Unlike the other 2 humans, who wore flowing, colorful garments, Blackwell was encased in a tight-fitting dark uniform adorned with small metallic symbols. His face was set in what appeared to be a neutral expression, but Krill'toc's empathic receptors detected something underneath, a constant, simmering alertness. "Please be seated," the Admiral said, gesturing to the 3 empty chairs on the opposite side of the table. As the humans settled in, Krill'toc noticed something odd. While Ambassador Reeves and Dr. Patel seemed to marvel at their surroundings, their eyes widening at the gravity-defying decorative elements and luminescent ceiling panels, Captain Blackwell's gaze methodically swept the room, lingering briefly on each guard, each exit, and each member of the Confederation delegation. Before we begin formal discussions, Ambassador Reeves said with a warm smile, I want to express humanity's profound gratitude for this opportunity. For centuries, we have wondered if we were alone in the universe. To discover that we are part of a vast galactic community is, well, it's humbling. Admiral Voxnall nodded graciously. The discovery of new sentient species is always a momentous occasion for the Confederation. We have much to learn from each other. Indeed, said Dr. Patel, her voice melodic and enthusiastic. Our preliminary analysis of your language transmission has already revolutionized several linguistic theories on Earth. The mathematical precision of your communication system is absolutely fascinating. Belvazar's eye stalks perked up with pride. The Grand Universal Language was developed over 17 millennia to facilitate clear communication between all Confederation species. It eliminates the ambiguities that plague most naturally evolved languages. Fascinating, Dr. Patel repeated, scribbling notes on a primitive electronic device. Throughout this exchange, Captain Blackwell remained silent, his eyes continuing their systematic surveillance of the room. Perhaps, suggested Krill'toc, unable to contain his curiosity any longer, the captain would like to share his impressions as well. All eyes turned to Blackwell, who seemed momentarily surprised to be addressed. He cleared his throat. Your ship is impressive. I particularly note the redundant life support systems and the clever placement of your security personnel. An uncomfortable silence followed. Ambassador Reeves laughed nervously. You will have to forgive Captain Blackwell. Military minds tend to focus on practical matters. No forgiveness necessary, Admiral Voxnall said smoothly. Security is indeed a priority on all Confederation vessels. Now, shall we proceed with the formal agenda? First item, establishing diplomatic protocols for future interactions. The meeting progressed predictably from there. Ambassador Reeves was eloquent and charming. Dr. Patel asked insightful questions about Confederation culture and technology, and Captain Blackwell, well, he just sat there, watching, occasionally making a cryptic note on his electronic pad. 2 hours into the discussions. During a break in the proceedings, Krill'toc found himself alone with Captain Blackwell near the refreshment station. The human was examining a Confederation food synthesizer with apparent interest. It converts raw molecular components into any nutritional configuration programmed into its database. Krill'toc explained, attempting to be friendly. Would you like to try something? Perhaps a traditional delicacy from my homeworld. Blackwell straightened up. Thank you, but I will stick with water for now. He paused, then added, standard protocol when visiting unknown environments. Of course, Krill'toc nodded, trying not to be offended. May I ask you something, Captain? Your colleagues seem quite enthusiastic about joining the galactic community, but you appear reserved. Blackwell's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. It's my job to be reserved, First Officer Krill'toc. Humanity has a long history of first contacts going badly. Oh, between human nations, you mean? Sometimes, Blackwell said. Other times between humans and other Earth species. We have driven countless creatures to extinction, usually without even meaning to. Krill'toc's antennae quivered in surprise. You have had first contact with other sentient species on your own planet? Not sentient, no. At least, not by your definition. But intelligent enough that we should have known better. Blackwell's voice had taken on an odd quality that Krill'toc couldn't quite interpret. Dolphins, great apes, elephants. We are still trying to make amends for our mistakes. I see, said Krill'toc, though he didn't, not really. Rest assured, Captain, the Confederation has strict protocols to ensure peaceful integration of new species. Good to hear, Blackwell replied, his tone flat. In my experience, protocols are only as good as the people following them. Before Krill'toc could respond to this rather cryptic statement, they were called back to the table. The rest of the meeting proceeded without incident, culminating in an agreement to establish a permanent Earth embassy on the Confederation capital world of Nexus Prime. As the delegation prepared to depart, Ambassador Reeves presented Admiral Voxnall with a small blue sphere. This contained selected cultural artifact from Earth: music, art, literature, and historical records. We hope it will help the Confederation better understand humanity. A thoughtful gift, the Admiral replied, carefully placing the sphere in a containment field. It will be thoroughly analyzed before being added to the Great Archive. As the humans turned to leave, Science Director Belvazar hurried after them. Dr. Patel, a moment please. I have prepared some linguistic comparison matrices that might interest you. While Dr. Patel and Belvazar became engrossed in technical discussion, Krill'toc noticed Captain Blackwell standing slightly apart, examining a holographic display of the Confederation's territorial boundaries. Driven by curiosity that he would later regret, Krill'toc approached him. Impressed by the scope of the Confederation, Captain, impressed by the logistics, Blackwell replied without looking away from the display. Maintaining security across such vast distances must be challenging. We have our methods, Krill'toc said proudly. The Confederation Peace Fleet is the most advanced military force in the known galaxy. Now Blackwell did turn, fixing Krill'toc with an intense stare. Military? I thought you called it a peace fleet. Well, yes, Krill'toc stammered, suddenly feeling defensive. It's primarily for peacekeeping. The Confederation hasn't engaged in actual warfare for over 7 centuries. 700 years without war. Blackwell's expression betrayed genuine surprise for the first time. How was that possible? Through civilization, of course, Krill'toc replied, somewhat smugly. When species reach a certain level of technological and cultural advancement, they recognize that warfare is irrational and counterproductive. Blackwell made a sound, a short, sharp exhalation that Krill'toc couldn't interpret. So, the Confederation has never had to deal with resistance? No insurgencies, rebellions, or territorial disputes? Oh, occasionally primitive species might resist initial contact, Krill'toc admitted. But once they understand the benefits of joining the Confederation, conflict becomes unnecessary. Besides, our technological superiority usually precludes any serious resistance. Usually, Blackwell repeated, his tone unreadable. Well, there was the Zorn incident about 3 centuries ago, Krill'toc said, his scholarly instincts overriding his diplomatic training. A species that refused integration. They employed rather unconventional tactics. How so? They targeted civilian infrastructure rather than military installations. Quite barbaric, really. Of course, the Peace Fleet had to respond with appropriate measures. Appropriate measures, Blackwell echoed, his voice suddenly cold. What exactly does that mean? Krill'toc shifted uncomfortably. The conflict was resolved. The surviving Zorn were rehabilitated and eventually integrated into Confederation society. The surviving ones, Blackwell said softly. Then, more directly, you committed genocide. Krill'toc's respiratory sacs inflated in shock. Certainly not. The Peace Fleet simply neutralized their capacity for aggression. It was regrettable, but necessary. Besides, it was all conducted according to the Confederation rules of engagement. Rules of engagement, Blackwell repeated, his lips curving into what Krill'toc now recognized as a distinctly non-friendly smile. Let me guess. These rules were created by the Confederation. For the Confederation. Well, naturally. The Confederation represents the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Who else would establish the protocols for proper conduct? Blackwell fell silent for a moment, seeming to choose his next words carefully. First Officer Krill'toc, are you familiar with the concept of war crimes? Va, crimes. The translator implant in Krill'toc's speech center struggled with the term. You mean tactical errors during conflict? No, Blackwell said, his voice dropping to a near whisper that somehow made Krill'toc's exoskeleton feel too tight. I mean atrocities committed during warfare that are so heinous, so fundamentally wrong, that they're considered crimes against sentience itself. That's an interesting philosophical concept, Krill'toc managed, suddenly wishing he'd stayed at the conference table. It's not philosophy where I come from, Blackwell continued. On Earth, we have had to learn these lessons the hard way. Through thousands of years of brutality, we have established limits on how we conduct warfare. Not because warfare itself can be civilized, but because without those limits, we risk losing our humanity entirely. Humans have rules for how to kill each other. Despite himself, Krill'toc was intrigued. We have rules for what we won't do, even to our enemies, Blackwell corrected. No targeting civilians. No torture. No weapons that cause unnecessary suffering. No genocide. He emphasized this last word, his eyes boring into Krill'toc's. We don't always live up to these ideals, but we strive for them. We have courts specifically to try those who violate these principles. Krill'toc processor was working overtime to make sense of this. You punish your own military personnel for being too effective? Blackwell's face did something complex that the first officer couldn't interpret. We punish them for being inhumane, for crossing lines that shouldn't be crossed, no matter the provocation. But surely in extreme circumstances, that's always the justification, isn't it? Blackwell interrupted, his voice suddenly harsh. Extreme circumstances, necessary measures, the greater good. Throughout human history, the worst atrocities have been committed by those convinced they were doing what needed to be done. A chime sounded, signaling the end of the diplomatic recess. Ambassador Reeves called out, "Captain Blackwell, we need to return to our shuttle." Blackwell nodded at Krill'toc. "Think about what I have said, First Officer. Your 7 centuries of peace might look different from the perspective of those who didn't get a vote." With that cryptic remark, the human military officer rejoined his delegation, leaving Krill'toc deeply unsettled. After the humans departed, the Confederation delegation convened for their post-meeting analysis. Initial assessment. Moderately successful, Admiral Voxnall declared. The humans seem eager to establish diplomatic relations. Their technology is primitive, but they show remarkable adaptability, Belvazar added. Dr. Patel informed me that they developed faster-than-light communication less than 50 years after discovering basic radio waves. That's an unprecedented rate of development. Krill'toc remained silent, his mind still processing Captain Blackwell's words. "First Officer, you are uncharacteristically quiet," the Admiral noted. "Your impressions?" "I'm concerned," Krill'toc admitted, "particularly about their military perspective." "Elaborate," commanded Voxnall that Krill'toc recounted his conversation with Captain Blackwell, watching his colleagues' reactions shift from amusement to puzzlement to concern. "Vakrimis," Belvazar repeated incredulously when he finished. "One absurd concept. Either you are at war or you are not. If you are at war, you use whatever means necessary to achieve victory. If certain actions are unacceptable, then you shouldn't be at war in the first place." "I believe," Krill'toc said carefully, "that humans view warfare differently than we do. They seem to have developed complex ethical frameworks around conflict. Ethics have no place on the battlefield," snorted Admiral Voxnall. "Perhaps this explains why they are still confined to their solar system despite their apparent technological potential. They waste resources on moral considerations that could be better spent on practical advancements. With all due respect, Admiral," Krill'toc persisted, "I think we should investigate further before dismissing their perspective." Captain Blackwell implied that the Confederation's peacekeeping methods might be considered problematic by human standards. Problematic? The Admiral's voice rose indignantly. "The Peace Fleet has maintained stability across 27 sectors for 7 centuries. What could possibly be problematic about that? The means, sir, not the ends. This is ridiculous," Belvazar interjected. "Are we really going to question our entire civilization based on the primitive moral posturing of a species that still kills each other over resource distribution and ideological differences?" Admiral Voxnall raised a calming appendage. "No, we are not. But First Officer Krill'toc raises a valid point about cultural differences that could affect diplomatic relations. I'm authorizing a full analysis of the cultural artifact they provided. Belvazar, assign your best xenoanthropologist to the task." "Yes, Admiral," the science director replied, clearly displeased. In the meantime, the Admiral continued, "We proceed as planned with the integration protocols. Earth will receive Category 3 technological assistance and limited access to Confederation knowledge repositories. And military oversight, Krill'toc asked. Standard procedure. One defensive platform in their outer solar system. Just enough to discourage any unfortunate initiatives. 3 days later, Krill'toc was summoned urgently to the Admiral's private chambers. He arrived to find Voxnal and Belvazar staring at a holographic projection with expressions of horror. First Officer, the Admiral said without preamble, what you are about to see has been classified at the highest security level. The analysis of the human cultural artifact revealed some disturbing information. Belvazar manipulated a control panel, and the hologram shifted to display historical footage from Earth. What Krill'toc witnessed over the next hour would fundamentally alter his understanding of the universe. Humans at war with each other. Not the clean, strategic conflicts of Confederation historical records, but chaotic, brutal, devastating warfare. Cities reduced to rubble. Mass graves. Weapons designed specifically to maximize suffering. And the scale of it, global conflicts that engulfed entire continents. This can't be real, Krill'toc whispered as the display showed the aftermath of something called nuclear warfare. No species could survive this level of self-destruction. That's just it, Belvazar said, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. They not only survived, they continued to advance technologically. And look at this. The display shifted again, showing footage of human military training exercises. Soldiers crawling through mud under barbed wire as explosions detonated around them. Hand-to-hand combat training of brutal efficiency. Underwater infiltration techniques. Airborne assault drops. They trained for every conceivable environment, the Admiral noted grimly. Desert, Arctic, tropical, aquatic, subterranean, urban. Their soldiers are conditioned to function under extreme duress. But most concerning, Belvazar continued, is this. The hologram now displayed historical images of human asymmetric warfare. Guerrilla fighters ambushing technologically superior forces. Improvised explosive devices. Resistance movements operating behind enemy lines. They have perfected the art of fighting against technologically superior opponents, the Admiral said. Throughout their history, smaller human forces have repeatedly defeated larger, better-equipped armies through these unconventional tactics. The very tactics the Zorn attempted to use against us, Krill'toc realized aloud. Yes, Belvazar nodded. But where the Zorn failed, humans have a long history of success. And there's more. The next series of images showed human judicial proceedings, war crimes trials, they were called. Krill'toc watched as military leaders were held accountable for atrocities committed during conflict, just as Captain Blackwell had described. They have developed a complex moral and legal framework around warfare, Belvazar explained. Not to prevent conflict, but to establish boundaries within it. And based on our analysis, many standard Confederation peacekeeping protocols would violate these boundaries. Such as, Krill'toc asked, though he already suspected the answer, planetary sterilization, biological pacification, neural compliance induction, selective population reduction. The Admiral listed these procedures as if reciting a shopping list. All standard protocols for dealing with non-compliant populations. All potential war crimes by human standards, Krill'toc concluded. Precisely, the Admiral confirmed. And now we face a dilemma. The standard integration protocol calls for establishing a military presence in their system. But based on this analysis, humans might perceive such action as an aggressive act rather than a peacekeeping measure. They would resist, Krill'toc said, understanding dawning. And their resistance would trigger escalating responses from the peace fleet, Belvazar added, potentially leading to exactly the kind of conflict these protocols were designed to prevent. So what do we do? Krill'toc asked. Admiral Voxnal's expression was grave. For the first time in 7 centuries, we are modifying the standard integration protocol. No defensive platform will be deployed to the human system at this time. Krill'toc blinked in surprise. That's unprecedented. So are humans, Belvazar replied dryly. Our predictive models suggest a 78% probability that standard military oversight would lead to conflict within 5 orbital cycles. And our simulations of such conflict are troubling. They would lose, surely. Krill'toc couldn't imagine any single species standing against the might of the Confederation Peace Fleet. Eventually, yes, the Admiral conceded. But at what cost? These humans have a saying that Captain Blackwell included in his personal notes, which were part of the cultural package. He wrote, "The guerrilla wins if he does not lose. The conventional army loses if it does not win." I don't understand, Krill'toc admitted. It means, Belvazar explained, that even if we defeated their conventional forces quickly, they would likely resort to these guerrilla tactics. The conflict could drag on for decades. The Peace Fleet hasn't engaged in prolonged warfare for centuries. We are not prepared for that kind of fight, so we are just going to let them join the Confederation on their own terms. Krill'toc couldn't hide his shock. No, the Admiral said firmly. We are going to proceed cautiously. Limited technology transfers, careful cultural exchange, and most importantly, a deeper study of human warfare and ethics. If we're going to successfully integrate them into the Confederation, we need to understand how they think. 2 weeks later, Krill'toc found himself preparing for another meeting with the human delegation. This time, however, he was traveling to their space station orbiting Earth's moon, a gesture of diplomatic reciprocity that was also unprecedented for initial integration stages. As the Confederation shuttle approached the human station, Krill'toc studied the blue-green planet below. Such an unassuming world to produce such a complex species. Nervous? Asked Belvazar, who had insisted on accompanying him despite the Admiral's concerns. Shouldn't I be? Krill'toc replied. You have seen the same data I have. I have seen a species that has spent its entire history fighting itself, she said. That doesn't mean they will fight us. In fact, it might make them more eager for peaceful relations. I hope you are right. The docking procedure went smoothly, and they were greeted by a small reception committee led by Ambassador Reeves. Captain Blackwell was present again, standing slightly behind the ambassador, still wearing that same inscrutable expression. Welcome to Artemis Station, Reeves said warmly. We are honored to host representatives of the Confederation. The tour of the station was fascinating. Despite its primitive construction, the facility was remarkably functional. Humans clearly had a talent for making the most of limited resources. During a demonstration of their environmental systems, Krill'toc found himself once again alone with Captain Blackwell. Your first officer has been studying our history, Blackwell said without preamble. Krill'toc's respiratory sacs constricted in surprise. How could you possibly know that? The human's lips curved in that not-quite smile. Your defensive platform never arrived in our system. Given standard Confederation protocols, that means something changed your assessment of us. The only thing that could have changed it was the cultural package we provided, which included our military history. You expected this reaction? You included that information deliberately. Let's just say I wanted to ensure full transparency between our civilizations, Blackwell replied. Misconceptions can lead to tragic mistakes. Was that a threat, Captain? No, First Officer. It was a preventative measure. Blackwell paused, then added, humans have a saying, peace through strength. We prefer friendship, but we are prepared for alternatives. The Confederation only seeks peaceful integration, Krill'toc assured him. On whose terms? The directness of the question caught Krill'toc off guard. The Confederation has centuries of experience integrating new species. So I have heard, Blackwell said, including the Zorn. Krill'toc felt a chill run through his central nervous column. That situation was complicated. War always is, Blackwell agreed, surprising Krill'toc. That's why we have developed such complex rules around it. Not because we enjoy complications, but because we have learned the hard way what happens without them. You actually believe these. War crimes concepts make conflict more humane. No, Blackwell said sharply. Nothing makes war humane. These rules just help us retain our humanity while engaging in the most inhumane activity possible. He paused, studying Krill'toc's reaction. Your Confederation seems to believe it has transcended warfare. We haven't. We still understand its cost, which is why we work so hard to avoid it. Before Krill'toc could respond, Ambassador Reeves called them to join the main group. Later that evening, during the formal dinner, Ambassador Reeves raised a toast. To new friendships and mutual understanding. And to peace, added Belvazar. To peace, echoed Captain Blackwell, his eyes meeting Krill'toc's across the table. Through understanding, not dominance. After the dinner, as the Confederation representatives prepared to return to their shuttle, Captain Blackwell approached Krill'toc one last time. "I wanted to thank you," the human said. "For what?" "For listening. For taking our perspective seriously. Not everyone in your delegation does." Krill'toc hesitated, then decided on honesty. "Your species frightens us, Captain. Not because you're more advanced or more powerful, but because you're unpredictable. You don't fit our models." Blackwell actually laughed at that, a genuine expression of amusement that transformed his usually stern features. "Welcome to humanity's eternal struggle. We don't fit our own models either. Then how do you maintain order? How do you progress?" "Through constant adaptation. Through recognizing that models should serve reality, not the other way around." Blackwell extended his hand, a human greeting gesture that Krill'toc had studied. "Your Confederation has achieved something remarkable with its 7 centuries of peace. But peace maintained through force isn't really peace at all. It's just a postponed war." Krill'toc grasped the human's hand awkwardly. "What would you suggest instead?" "Partnership," Blackwell said simply. "Not integration. Not assimilation. Equal standing with mutual respect. Even though you are technologically behind us." "Technology isn't everything," Blackwell replied. "Sometimes, understanding what not to do with your technology is more important than what you can do with it." As the Confederation shuttle detached from Artemis Station and began its journey back to the diplomatic vessel, Krill'toc found himself deep in thought. "You are quiet again," Belvazar observed. "I'm thinking about war crimes," Krill'toc replied. "About how a species that has experienced so much conflict might actually understand peace better than one that hasn't seen war in centuries." "That's preposterous," Belvazar scoffed. "Peace is the absence of conflict." "Is it?" Krill'toc mused. "Or is true peace something more complex? A balance of power, mutual respect, and shared values?" "Now you sound like a human. Perhaps that's not such a bad thing," Krill'toc said. "They have survived challenges that would have destroyed most species. Maybe we have something to learn from them after all." Belvazar's eye stalks swiveled skeptically. "Such as the limits of power," Krill'toc said slowly, working it out as he spoke. "The Confederation has grown so accustomed to being the dominant force that we have forgotten what it's like to treat others as equals. We don't seek consent. We simply expect compliance. Because our way works. For us," Krill'toc agreed, "but maybe not for everyone." The shuttle docked with the diplomatic vessel Harmony, but as Krill'toc prepared to disembark, he found himself wondering if the vessel's name had ever been accurate. Harmony imposed from above wasn't harmony at all. The next day, he submitted his formal report on the human delegation visit. In his recommendations section, he wrote, "Traditional integration protocols are unsuitable for humanity. This species has evolved in an environment of constant conflict, developing complex ethical frameworks around warfare that directly contradict Confederation peacekeeping methodologies. Attempting to apply standard oversight measures would likely provoke exactly the conflict we seek to avoid. Instead, I recommend a new approach based on mutual cooperation rather than hierarchical integration." The humans have a term that Captain Blackwell emphasized repeatedly: war crimes, acts considered unacceptable even during conflict. Many standard Confederation protocols would qualify as such under human ethical frameworks. Before proceeding further with integration, I strongly recommend a comprehensive review of all Confederation peacekeeping methodologies through the lens of human ethics. Not because we should necessarily adopt their perspective, but because understanding it is crucial to successful diplomatic relations. Humanity may be less technologically advanced than the Confederation, but they understand the nature of conflict in ways we have forgotten. 7 centuries of peace have dulled our comprehension of war's realities. The humans remember, and that memory makes them dangerous, not necessarily as enemies, but as individuals who will not blindly accept domination, regardless of how benevolent we believe our intentions to be. In conclusion, I believe humanity represents not just a new species to be integrated, but an opportunity for the Confederation to re-examine its fundamental approach to galactic governance. As Captain Blackwell said, peace through understanding, not dominance. It is a concept worthy of consideration. Krill'toc sent the report, knowing it would cause consternation among the Confederation leadership. Standard protocols were comfortable. They were predictable. They had worked for 7 centuries, but humans weren't standard. And pretending otherwise would be not just foolish, but potentially catastrophic. As he gazed out at the stars from his quarters, Krill'toc wondered what the Confederation would look like a century from now, with humans as members rather than subjects. Different, certainly. More chaotic, probably. But perhaps also more just. More vibrant. More harmonious, in a way that transcended mere compliance. Captain Blackwell's words echoed in his mind. War crimes. Such a strange concept. The idea that even in conflict, there were lines that shouldn't be crossed. That morality persisted even when peace failed. Perhaps, Krill'toc reflected, the real crime wasn't war itself, but forgetting why peace mattered in the first place.